Good morning, church. Pastor Ben here, again with your daily Devo. We're in a series called Basic Principles. And we started here because we asked ourselves, when Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added to you," what did he mean? If he said that we're supposed to seek first the kingdom, what is the kingdom? So we started with the image of God and the rule of mankind, that during creation that God created human beings to be in his image, and that was supposed to image both directions. That mankind was supposed to, in some way, shape, or form, represent both God to the created world and represent the created world to God, to be the intermediaries, if you will, between our existence here on earth and the existence in heaven. That heaven and earth would be combined in mankind somehow, in some way. And then we talked a little bit about what it meant to rule. If we are meant to rule, what does that mean? What did Jesus teach us about meaning? And we said that to rule is to serve. We also talked about the gospel. We talked about the fact that the good news or the gospel isn't just about how do I get to heaven when I die. It's about developing a believing loyalty in the King sitting on the throne and be ready to do his will and his bidding. It goes beyond what we call personal salvation. And we also talked about the fact that we often, or the reason why things went so badly, is because we always want to control. We want to take our ability to rule and have authority and power and exercise that over other people. Whether that means we do it in an overt way as a emperor or king or Caesar, or shall we say Der Führer, a Hitler figure who would be in charge over other people, or just somebody who lords it over their family, an abusive father or abusive father figure, an abusive boss. But also that we tend to try to manipulate others to do what we want them to do, instead of giving them the free will to do what they want to do, understanding that they're ordered in the image of God. So that's where we've gotten up to. We're in this state. And so there's one other topic I want to touch on before we move into what are all the implications for our lives. And I want to start by reading you something from the book of Mark. It says, "At that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, 'You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased.'" So that introduces us to the topic of baptism. Baptism, unfortunately, has been a bone of contention in Christianity for a very long time. And it really shouldn't be. There should be no debate, but there is. This short little scripture in Mark has some fairly subtle, but if you're looking for them, you see them, echoes from several events found in the Old Testament. The first is, of course, creation. The Spirit hovering over Jesus, over the water. That sounds just like the opening lines of Genesis. And then there's the heavens dividing above Jesus, and Jesus coming up out of the water. Well, that sounds an awful lot like the Exodus, when the children of Israel were led by Moses through the parting of the sea and the Red Sea. It also sounds an awful lot like another scene later on where Joshua takes the children of Israel across the Jordan River and the waters are parted. So over and over again we see this confluence in Scripture of water, of a change being made in somebody's life or a nation's life in the case of Israel. We see the Spirit involved, and we see the voice of God, the voice of the Father, and now we have the Son. And all of these things come together in this baptism of Jesus. And so all these images would be popping for the average Israelite as they'd be reading this, because they would be steeped in these stories. And so it would be unmistakable to them. And so it shouldn't surprise us that later in the scriptures, in the New Testament, the other apostles used the imagery of the flood and the Exodus and other events in Israelite history to illustrate what baptism is doing for us. So what is baptism? We've already established that faith in Jesus is what puts us into the kingdom. That baptism, people always ask the question, does baptism save you? Well, no, your believing loyalty in Jesus is what saves you. But remember, the gospel is about more than. It just starts with, I believe the facts about Jesus and I get to go to heaven. The gospel is about, that's the beginning point. The beginning point is there. And what the baptism is it's an initiation rite. It's a ceremony that says, I want to be part of this kingdom. I want to enter this kingdom. I want to enter this kingdom in a similar way to what the people, children of Israel, crossed the Red Sea into their salvation, to be saved from the Egyptian armies that were closing in behind them. Peter uses the imagery of the flood, that these 8 people were saved, through the flood. Well, we are saved, and he says in the same way, you are saved. Well, it doesn't mean that you have salvation of your soul, that you get to go to heaven when you die. You have to be baptized to get to go to heaven when you die. That's somebody saying at all. He's saying this when you do the baptism, when you perform baptism, you're performing an initiation rite that should remind you of these other events in history. One of the images I use a lot with people on baptism is marriage. And so I ask the question, can you be married without having a wedding? Well, of course you can. You could just go down to the courthouse and sign some papers. You wouldn't even necessarily have to both be there to do it. You could sign them at different times, and now you're married. But nobody would. Nobody would not have a wedding. People would ask the question, are you really married if you didn't have a wedding? And if you said, we don't want to have a wedding, people would, why wouldn't you want to have a wedding? And I think if you could bring the Apostle Paul forward to today and ask him, do you have to be baptized to be saved? I think his response would be exactly that. Why would you not? Why wouldn't you be baptized? Why are you even asking the question? Why is your pride so strong? Why are you so caught up? Why are you so worried about what somebody's going to think that you wouldn't perform the initiation ceremony that Jesus gave us an example of in order to enter his kingdom, to show people that you've entered his kingdom? We create a distinction without a difference, and that's just too bad. Let's if you haven't been baptized, this is definitely a basic principle. This is something you really, really need to take a good hard look at, right? Why have I not done this? Why have I been afraid? Why am I not willing to step out publicly for Jesus and proclaim for Jesus? If I want to be saved, if I want to go to heaven when I die, why would I limit myself? Why would I limit my citizenship? Why would I limit my... There's just so many metaphors we could use, right? When someone becomes a citizen of the United States, they take the oath of citizenship. Would they have to do that? No, I guess they really wouldn't. They could just sign some papers and be a citizen, but that they go through a ceremony to become a citizen. They're proud of that. When you become a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, baptism is your way of doing that. It's your way of going through the ceremony to say, I am now part of this kingdom. He is my Lord. I will follow him and be loyal to him and do the best I can to remain faithful to him. So I encourage you to think about that. Pray for your friends and relatives who have not stepped forward to become part of that kingdom. And God bless you today. And keep being the church.